There is, to me, another very significant aspect of these moments of spontaneous contemplative experience, and that is that they're recognized as being revelatory. By being revelatory, I mean we intuitively sense that they reveal to us the way we deep down really are, one with the way the one unending present moment in which our lives unfold really is. That is, when we reflect upon it, we realize that it's always now, it's never not now, and this moment of awakening, it's not set apart as a moment that's other than all other moments. Rather, it's a moment in which we fleetingly glimpse the true nature of the one and ending moment in which our life is unfolding. And so these moments are to us then trustworthy. That is, we can trust what these moments reveal to us about ourselves, and we can trust what they reveal to us about the nature of the life that we're living. Another implication is that as we learn to have faith in the revelatory nature of these moments, we begin to realize that it pertains to this present moment. That is, this present moment in which I am sharing this session with you, in which you are present with me listening to it. This moment is inherently precious. This moment is endlessly holy. And we know that it's true because we have fleetingly tasted for ourselves the inherent holiness of every moment, of this moment. And so by reflecting on these moments, and by honoring these moments, and by having faith in these moments, we are at some very deep level already beginning to live a more contemplative way of life. Maybe, in fact, actually, this is what a contemplative person is. It's a person who walks day by day in a deep, underlying, childlike confidence, a sense of trustworthiness of life just as it is, because they know that their own heart, in its most childlike hour, did not deceive them. I would now at this point like to move on to another section within the passage about the cosmic dance, which is also critically central to an understanding what it means to live a contemplative way of life. Namely, being aware of how these moments, like all moments, tend to pass. And as these moments pass, we tend to return to our customary state of unawareness of the inherent holiness of the life that we're living. But by way of faith in the revelatory nature of the moment of awakening, we now are aware of our unawareness. We are now awake to our tendency not to be awake. We now know how we tend not to know. We begin to move into what we might call enlightened ignorance. That is, there is an unenlightened ignorance of not knowing that we don't know. And then there's the enlightened ignorance of knowing that we don't know. And we know that we don't know because of our faith in a moment in which we are granted a knowing, a deep, visceral, body-grounded knowing that we cannot explain to anyone, nor even to ourselves. And in the light of our faith in the truth of that moment, we see how we tend to go about so unaware of the inherent holiness of our day-by-day life. I'd like to share an image of this not knowing, or this sense of estrangement, in which Merton says we tend to go about in the tyranny of the sadness, absurdity, and despair of obsessing over what we think is the meaning of it all. Imagine that you're driving home in the evening, about sunset. You pull the car over to the side of the road, and you turn the engine off, and you just sit there watching the sunset. sitting there without agendas, no expectations, simply quiet and open and present to the holiness of day's end. And the sun sets, and you continue sitting like that until it's entirely dark. You turn the engine back on, you move on your way, you pull into the driveway, you get upset because someone left a bicycle in the driveway. You have to get out and move the bicycle out of the driveway. You look in the mailbox, hoping that a certain bill isn't there. It's there. Looking at the bill, you drop your keys, you have to pick up your keys, you go into the kitchen, you take out the garbage, you're looking through the mail. And as you're standing there in the kitchen like that, you remember the moment sitting there in the car at the setting sun. And you ask yourself, why do I have to spend so many of my waking hours trapped on the outer circumference of the inner richness of the life that I'm living? I know within my heart the preciousness of this moment, because sitting there in the setting sun, I tasted it for myself. Yet standing here in my own kitchen, I'm living as a stranger, exiled from the preciousness of my own life. This ache, this sense of homesickness, this sense of deep longing for a homecoming to God closer to us than we are to ourselves, which we intimately taste in our moments of spontaneous contemplative experience, this ache is so central to the contemplative way. So often we try to numb it. So often we try to run from it. A lot of contemplative living has to do with learning how not to flee from this restless inner longing. God made our hearts in such a way that only an infinite union with infinite love can fulfill us. Now, this infinite union with infinite love is in fact the reality of the present moment. It is in fact the reality of who we always are, but we are exiled from the childlike visceral awareness of who we always are. And in this we feel the longing, and in this we feel the estrangement from the inherent holiness of our own lived experience. This is our dilemma. We go about as manifestations of the divine, seeking the divine. Jesus says, "You have eyes to see and you do not see." And we do not realize directly for ourselves the divine mystery that's always before our eyes, the divine mystery that is our life itself. To me, actually, this image of exile was one of the most helpful experiences of my time I spent in the monastery. Here I was living in complete silence, and I was walking around in this silence with problems. And I was given to realize that we tend to think our problems are the problem. That is, we tend to think if only we could get rid of our problems, we'd have no problem. And we're always dismayed how just when we're working on our last few problems, a whole new crop springs up. And then it starts dawning on us, our problems are not the problem. The problem is a riddle within our hearts, a split, an estrangement that lies deep within us. Every time we sit in meditation, every time we sit in contemplative prayer, every time we quietly sit with ourselves just the way we are, we open ourselves to the willingness to touch this riddle of our estrangement. What takes so long to realize is that God is present to us in and as this very estrangement. There's the hidden, enigmatic holiness of the estrangement itself. Merton once said in a talk he gave to the novices, "The key to life is finding the kernel of pure truth. It's hidden in the middle of every situation." In our moments of spontaneous contemplative experience, we taste this kernel of pure truth directly for ourselves. In seeking to live a contemplative way of life, we seek to be ever more faithful to this kernel of pure truth. and we seek to learn to be ever more habitually aware of it. Here it seems then to me is a way in which we can begin to understand what it means to live a more contemplative way of life in the midst of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We can begin by remembering and reverencing and having faith in the revelatory nature of our own moments of spontaneous contemplative experience. We can begin by seeing how, in the light of these moments, how unaware we tend to be of the ever-present holiness of life itself. And we can begin to see how, if we are attentive to this tendency not to be attentive, if we're aware of how unaware we tend to be, we can feel a certain ache within our hearts, a certain homesickness, a certain longing to be ever less unaware, ever more aware of the inherent holiness of life itself. This is the great path, and it's the path that Merton spoke to us about out of the depths of his own fidelity in living it. And through his words, we find sources of illumination that shed light on this path that we're called to walk day by day. Now, it seems to me that if we're being faithful here together to what this session has been about, the session brings us to silence, and it brings us to the renewed awareness within our own hearts of this longing within ourselves for this union. And in fidelity to this desire, I would like to suggest a meditation practice.